Kurban Bayramımız mübarek olsun herkese. I greet you with joy at being invited by the Turkish Cultural Center in New Hampshire to speak as a member of the Greek Orthodox community here in the United States and as a spiritual child of the Ecumenical Patriarchate of Constantinople, the historic Rum Patrikhanesi in modern Istanbul. I give thanks to His All Holiness Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew, who has always been interested and supportive in the various encounters, mutual activities, and dialogues in which I have come face to face with friends from the Turkish community. I am likewise grateful to the Greek Orthodox Metropolitan of Boston, His Eminence Metropolitan Methodius, for his blessings to participate in this auspicious event within the territory of his see, and who is himself an ardent worker for dialogue and peace between diverse cultures and religious communities here in New England and throughout our nation. It is with their blessings that I find myself again among friends and making new ones on behalf of religious understanding and mutual respect. I have been asked to reflect on dialogue between diverse cultures and the Gulen movement's contributions. In spite, it is an honor to be invited with such distinguished guests, the Honorable Speaker of the House, state senators and state representatives, civic leaders and religious leaders, among others, and present in a city, by the way, that has a fellow Greek as a mayor. Speaking at the invitation of an organization founded by Turkish Americans about a leading Muslim thinker, humanist, philosopher, and poet hailing from Turkey. Already the contributions of Hoxha Efendi Fethullah Gulen and his movement that bears his name has achieved something that a generation or two ago would have been almost unthinkable. The presence of such diverse persons here this evening is an obvious sign of this achievement. As I have noted elsewhere, addressing members of the Turkish American community and even receiving an award from one such organization would have shocked my Greek grandparents and is still suspect in some quarters of our Greek and Turkish communities. The Greek and Turkish peoples each have a great and noble history. Histories that have in the past at times intersected painfully, but which remains ripe with possibilities for the present and the future. That potential is made possible by the attributes of persons such as Fethullah Gulen and others who seek peace, understanding, and cooperation among all. It's always an honor to be with so many people of like mind who, for the sake of peace and justice and in the higher ideals of their intellectual professions of faith and spiritual law, seek what we might all agree with St. Paul is a more excellent way. Surely, we religious types and others whose intellectual currency is the exchange of ideas between cultures are in our day and age in a tense time of fears and resentments, unique stewards of a special and exceptional place in history. As representatives of our respective cultures and faiths, as representatives of what our individual culture's legacy has shaped each of us to be, we are the inheritors of a vast wealth of knowledge, beauty, and also pain. Surely, even though we are the inheritors of history's conflicts, which admittedly sometimes color our more noble attempts to turn mere tolerance into understanding, we should be able to find some purpose and encouragement in that same history. This is not an easy thing in our time. In this age of constant media noise, political rancor, and lack of historical context, as Gulen, that intellectually and challenging Muslim thinker, has remarked, and I quote, Debate should not be for the sake of ego, but rather to enable the truth to appear. When we look at political debates in which the only thought is to vanquish the other person, there can be no positive result. For the truth to engage in a debate of ideas, such principles as mutual understanding, respect, and dedication to justice cannot be ignored. What I'm about to ask, I ask mindful of the deep commitments that all of us gathered may have toward their faith traditions and toward the means of promoting mutual understanding and peace. I hope that those of you here this evening who are neither Turkish nor Greek will bear with me. I hope that you will bear with us, for it is no small event for me to be invited here and to have the great honor of addressing all here assembled at the invitation of my Turkish friends. The many other cultural and faith traditions represented this evening have been partners with us in a variety of dialogues and programs. We value these contacts and look forward to our continued sharing in love and honesty. However, unlike these communities, the Greek Orthodox Christian and Turkish Muslim communities share a long and unique past. Hence, I focus this evening on a complex and at times painful history that Orthodox Christianity and Islam, Greece and Turkey, has suffered and shared. We have come a long way. We have traveled a difficult road filled with many obstacles, physical violence, and the metaphorical obstacles of our intellectual insecurities that perhaps have hampered our higher aspirations even more than did our former darkness of our historical conflicts. Galen states this in another way, in broader terms, when he writes, negative feelings and attributes often defeat people, pulling them under their domination to such an extent that even the religions that guide people to goodness and kindness are abused, as well as the feelings and attributes that are sources of absolute good. How truly these words reflect the experience for so many of us and for our ancestors. And struggling with religion's truths, perhaps too weighty for us to comprehend fully and therefore abused by all of us, each misapplying their own ideals to baser human endeavors, we have suffered. What we did not understand was that we were suffering together. In retrospect, and likely into the future, our shared history contains hope for our shared destiny. Allow me to depict an image from our shared past, to recount an event that is shared by Greek Orthodox Christians and Turkish Muslims that is often overlooked. However, it has silently brought a message to us through the ages. In Istanbul, there are two images at the Patriarchate in the Fener, two mosaics. They grace the foyer of the entrance of the Patriarchal Office Building. On the one side is a depiction of St. Andrew, the first called of Jesus' apostles, and the first bishop of Byzantium. With him is Stachys, who was the first priest on whom St. Andrew conferred the authority that he had received from Jesus to be a bishop. St. Andrew was the first and Bishop Stachys the second in a long line of bishops who have made Byzantium, Constantinople, and Istanbul their homes. She is one city with many names, and for those of us who call her home in any fashion, she is known as the city. During the time that the city was known as Constantinople and the capital of the Christian Empire, it featured among its urban architecture a mosque for Muslims living in and visiting the city. On the other side of the foyer, at the Fener, is a mosaic that depicts the Patriarch Demetrios. He stands with his hands open, receiving a document being handed to him by Sultan Mehmet II in 1453. It's the Firman, the legal document guaranteeing that the Orthodox Church would continue its traditions and missions among its people during Muslim Ottoman rule. The first image depicts the beginning of one portion of our people's faith tradition. The next image depicts the inherent understanding of tradition that the progenitors of the Turkish nation had and would continue to keep. Our shared history is, it is no secret to us, something less than perfect. It is a human story about human people. Times and the tides of numerous historical fortunes have brought us to this moment. We find ourselves here this evening in the United States, and we are together at this moment in ways that could have only occurred because of this American's culture's strengths. Imagine what this gathering might mean to our ancestors if they were to see our presence here this evening, Turks and Greeks together, sharing freedom, sharing a meal, sharing, most importantly, hope for a still better future. I, a Greek Orthodox hierarch, one born in the United States whose spiritual ties are to that great city on the shores of the Bosphorus, stand before an audience at an event sponsored by a Turkish cultural center with the people of America's multicultural, multi-ethnic faith traditions, an honored guest. We are together at a table laden with the true food of human being, of human existence, understanding, mutual respect, and hope. Perhaps the two images at the Patriarchate could today be joined by a third, one that would represent this gathering tonight and all the gatherings that, inshallah, we will organize for the sake of peace and God's love in the world. Our future is contingent upon our knowledge of the past. History is always the greatest teacher. And after the long and difficult history of our peoples and our interactions, we have something else that can and must help us become even greater witnesses, each of our own cultures and of the shared experiences we still remember. We still have each other. It is perhaps a difficult truth to embrace, but those who have been enemies quite often understand each other better than those who have never been part of their conflict. In a popular contemporary film, one character says to the other whom he has just fought, "You never really know who someone is until you fight him." My friends, tonight we have an opportunity to look at each other in a unique and intense way, and seeing one another in truth and love, we may yet see ourselves in the other. And this, then, may become the key to our common future and works of righteousness done in shared hope for a better world. The Byzantine and Ottoman histories are complex, but they are both responsible for something that the West, that is, those people west of our shared experience of the East, rarely acknowledges. The Byzantine historian Vasiliev writes the following: "Perhaps the cultural influences of both the Byzantine Empire and Islam may be noted in the origin and progress of the so-called Italian Renaissance. Classical knowledge, which was carefully preserved by Byzantium, and various branches of knowledge which were not only preserved but also perfected by Arabs and Ottomans, played an essential role in the creation of the new cultural atmosphere. A connecting link between ancient culture and our modern civilization. Here we have an example of the cultural cooperation of the two most powerful and faithful forces of the Middle Ages, Byzantium and Islam." So perhaps, even in the course of our struggles against one another, we manage to give goodness to the world together. To save what was the best of our respective pasts and to allow the future to synthesize a mirror worthy of the deepest truths of our faith in which to see the truest reflection of our humanity. Torano Fazoglu says that what we need is to enrich ourselves with those aspects of foreign culture which are not congenial to our nature. We must seek the other amongst us and invite them into our lives. We must share our hopes, our fears, our joys, and our sorrows. We must find ways of transcending our conflicts, both historical and intellectual, and create a new future together. My friends, we are the world in small. May we now truly praise the Creator's gifts of life in all its diversity and walk together into the future in a new way. I hope that we will take the next steps with the same sense of warmth and respect that we have experienced in the first steps. To quote the late great patriarch of reconciliation, ecumenical patriarch Athenagoras, Elate nakitachthoume, come, let us look into one another's eyes. I'm able to share with you these thoughts this evening precisely of persons of goodwill, such as Fethullah Gulen, and those who have sought to promote the same ideals and principles he has articulated over a long period of time. It is not really for me to offer an evaluation of the influence of the movement that bears his name, for that would imply some level of objectivity that is frankly impossible for me. I do know that at least in the United States, persons and organizations affiliated with this movement, this Hizmet, have been instrumental in laying important foundations for cultural reconciliation, for goodwill in the light of the historical enmity between our people. Likewise, for all the criticism that is occasionally voiced here in the United States against the wider Muslim community for a perceived reticence in their religious leadership to speak out against what non-Muslims may characterize as religious extremism, members and leaders of the Gulen movement have been obvious, able, and worthy advocates for tolerance, for moderation, for peace and reconciliation without, it should be noted, any betrayal of their principles of Islam. Yet again, on this, I cannot be objective since I have worked side by side and, more importantly, face to face with such persons to establish friendships and bonds, and these usually by their initiative. Again, in the words of Gulen, principles and mutual understanding, respect, and dedication to justice cannot be ignored. I would certainly add that the movement that bears his name, insofar as it has demonstrated in concrete action these principles, should not be ignored, but rather appreciated and thanked. After all, the very word dialogue derives from the Greek dialogos, literally meaning through words, and just as relevant, through principles. As we continue to exchange words in pursuit of truth, as we come face to face and look into one another's eyes, we often find that many of our deepest valued principles are no different. So I thank all of you this evening for this extraordinary evening and for the great blessing that it is to know and proclaim to our people that I have shared this evening with friends. Allah emanet olun. Çok teşekkür ederim.